do they seek for your opinion? Does your opinion on things matter to them? Even with the older ones, as far as the music and the culture pressing on them, does your opinion of those things matter to them?
I think when they get married, there's a whole other dynamic of their spouse is the number one. But I think different dynamic when kids get married, because then I think we've had to learn this. Instead of being a chain of authority, we're actually just a chain of counsel.
Yes, absolutely.
And so you kind of step back and
don't give advice unless it's asked for.
Try not
and
to.
Just try to be that.
Hey friends, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Welcome back to my channel. It's Thursday, January 25th, 2024. I hope everyone's having a wonderful day. Well, I have a little bit of tea for you, some exclusive Without a Crystal Ball tea, and it's all about the Duggars. And I've got a few pieces of information we're going to talk about. First, we're going to talk about that pesky photo that James Duggar posted of Jill and Derick at the Duggar household on December 25th. And how that photo is extremely misleading, and how even I got a little bit caught up in that and realized that some of the things that I thought were happening in there were not actually what was happening. And images are not exactly how they appear. And I was able to get the scoop from Derek Dillard about what actually went down that day, and it's kind of a mess. And let's just say Jim Bob Duggar is still at it. So we'll talk about that. And Joanna and Austin Forsyth are dealing with some financial troubles, including unpaid taxes for 3 separate years, an income tax lien from the state of Arkansas slapped onto their house in Arkansas. So what's going on with the Duggars? Let's dive into today's topic. Before we do, can you do me a favor and give this video a thumbs up? Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed, and click on the bell so you never miss a video. In the very beginning of this video, I showed a clip from an interview with the Duggars. It's actually the last video that's posted on the IBLP's Embassy Media as their most recent interview. This was Jim, Bob, and Michelle sitting down for an ATI, which is their Advanced Training Institute. It was their homeschooling program that they no longer sell, but they were coming to speak about their journey raising 20 kids, and they were being probed by this individual about whether or not Jim Bob actually has the heart of his children. A lot of the conversation had to do with, are the kids looking to Jim Bob for counsel? Are they spending time getting in, having heart-to-heart conversations? Why did they have so many kids? And an interesting component in all of this is that Jim Bob, it gets a little bit timid when he starts talking about whether or not his kids have his heart. And he gets timid while discussing the adult children, because this dude was very particular about knowing, do you have the hearts of your adult children? Do they come to seek counsel from you? Jim Bob admits that he has had a problem with balancing being authoritarian with his adult children versus being like a counselor and giving them advice versus telling them what to do.
It used to be we just push the kids through in strollers and they'd be talking to each other or crying, whatever. But now half of them are adults and they've got their own opinion about how to do things, which is really good, except for when it conflicts with dad.
And the guy, for whatever reason, decides to shame Michelle and basically say that if Jim Bob has any problems with any of his kids, at the end of the day, it's ultimately all Michelle's fault. I want to show you this clip so that I can set the stage for you as to why what's happening with Jill will eventually get blamed on Michelle, but is also a symptom of why Jim Bob is like this when it comes to the women in his life. It's always their fault and it's never his.
I've sensed that when I see the two of you together, that you have an admiration for your husband. I don't believe you're perfect. Unless you are, then
No, she knows everything about me.
Right. But even with that, there's still an admiration there. And I think the mom has more to do with churning the hearts of children to their fathers than anybody. if she admires him, the children will admire their dad. If mom has a burr in her heart against her husband because he's not meeting her needs, she won't admire him, and neither will the children.
I want to set the stage for you to show you that in the ATI and the IBLP, women are basically told that if they have an opinion or a feeling that they want something from their husband, or say even if the kids want something from their dad, it's an entitlement. They're acting entitled, and they're not being grateful for whatever their husband chooses or their dad chooses to give to them. And so it's never the man's fault. And when the kids have a hard relationship with their father, so in this case, Jill and Derick, because the woman is to blame here. He says it's the mom's responsibility to admire the husband. And if you don't, if you have bitterness in your heart, and if you are not happy about some need that's not being met, and you show that to your kids, then your kids are going to follow you. And it's just flawed thinking. It's ridiculous, and it's wrong, because it puts the onus on the responsibility of the relationship on the mom when it's not. It's a lot like how Cody Brown blames his wives for his relationship with his kids going south, because they're the ones that own this relationship, right? That's sort of the stage I'm setting. You hear Jim Bob say that he has to balance counseling versus authority, and this guy at the ATI is encouraging him to make sure that his influence is still being implemented with his kids, and that his kids are following what he says. So he's getting the feedback from IBLP leaders that it's okay for him to be a dictator and to be a egotistical, narcissistic cult leader, right? And this group is basically accused of creating like little cults within families, with the father being the cult leader of their family, and then, the umbrella of the IBLP teaching sort of being over them. We all know that Jill and Derick are not allowed to come to the Duggars household, and Jim Bob has basically banned them from coming over unless they get permission to come over, or unless they call ahead and he's there. So naturally, on Christmas, when Jill and Derick had just written this book calling out Jim Bob, calling out his fraud, calling out his control, calling out the cult, calling out all of these problems within the family, not getting paid, the way that they were treated, the way he mistreated her over her brother Josh, who's in prison. After all of that, we see her at the Duggars house on Christmas. And naturally, Jill and Derick do not post a photograph there. They don't make it seem like it's a one big happy family. But naturally, James Duggar, who is a robot for Jim Bob and a lackey for Jim Bob, throws in a picture of Jill and Derick at the big house, which actually spurred a really negative reaction. I even got upset by it. I was like, what the hell are you guys doing? Why are you engaging with Jim Bob? You should not be at Christmas with him. I actually took that post down because I actually talked to Derick. So Jill and Derick, I'm sorry for that. But let me tell you what happened. So I was getting a little bit confused because there was a ton of information coming out. They did that podcast a couple weeks ago, and they said they hadn't seen him in a year. And then there was rumors that Jim Bob was gone. He was on a mission. Maybe he was seeing Josh in Seagaville. And I literally found out from Derick, from his mouth, what happened. So here's the deal. It was Christmas Day, but it was also a birthday party for Jeremiah and Hannah's Duggar's daughter. So for whatever reason, they made the decision to have Christmas and the baby's first birthday on the same day. And apparently, Hannah had sent an evite, or an invitation via text message to Jill, and included Jill in the invitation. And so Jill and Derick believed that they had been invited to this birthday party for Jeremiah and Hannah. And apparently, once Jim Bob found out that Jill and Derick had been invited, he lost his mind, and he was not happy with Derick or Jill. Derick said he actually initially tried to prevent us from coming to the birthday party once he found out we were coming. It's obvious by his long history that Jim Bob cuts his family, those he controls, off from anyone that doesn't let Jim Bob do what Jim Bob wants, i.e. those he can't control. If we weren't family, he wouldn't even let us have any interactions with Jill's siblings. As soon as Jim Bob finds out that Hannah had invited them, he tries to stop them from coming over and says they can't come over. And he's doing this to punish Jill and to keep Jill away from her siblings after Jill had written that book. Jim has told the siblings that Jill is dangerous and that she can't be trusted, that she's a liar, that she's just greedy, that she's just doing this out of spite and bitterness. He tries to get them not to come and says, you weren't really invited. Derick said that they would have preferred that the party not be at the Duggars' house, but they couldn't control, where it was, and they wanted to see their niece. They didn't want Jim Bob to be able to control them and their desire to keep relationships with her siblings. So Jill doesn't want her dad to have the ability to control who she can and who she can't talk to. And so she went around and circumvented his process and his attempts to stop her from coming. So Derick went on to say, if we weren't family, he wouldn't let us have any interaction with her siblings. Hannah must not have gotten the memo from Jim Bob that she wasn't supposed to invite Jill. She must have put the invite on the wrong family text thread, according to Jim Bob. What it boils down to is that Jim Bob doesn't actually want to be held accountable to anyone, the family, the church, or the IRS. Hannah invited Jill without consulting Jim Bob. So Jim Bob then comes up with a story that it was a misstep by Hannah and that she accidentally invited them. They weren't really invited. She doesn't really want to see them. She put it in the wrong text thread. They're on a different family text thread and they accidentally happened to include the invite in the one that Jill was on, which wasn't true. So they obviously have a blowout about it, and despite that blowout and despite Jim Bob's attempts to thwart their ability to see the siblings, they went to the house anyway. And they went to go see their niece, and they were there for a while, and it was fine. Jim Bob is not allowing his kids to have access to people that do not bend to him or who do not agree with him. Anyone that defies Jim Bob loses access to his children, and he doesn't allow any outsiders to see them, only any family. He even tried to keep his own daughter away. So now you kind of understand how much control he has over his kids. Good for Derick and Jill for not bending to his power move, and that blowout that must have been very uncomfortable. But isn't it ironic that Jim Bob's the one that created the mess, makes everything feel uncomfortable for Derick and Jill, and then somehow, some way has James post a photo of Jill and Derick at the house. On the one hand, in the private life, he's saying, you can't come over, you can't come over, you can't come over. But on the other hand, he's so obsessed with his public image that he wants people to think that he's loving and accepting and bridging gaps with Jill, and that Jill is just being a liar. And so that he's doing what he can. So he wants to prove that Jill is welcome in his home. And that's really the only reason I would say that photo was posted. And James isn't going to just dump it on there without talking to his dad, because his dad is what basically controlling their social media. It's just a sick, twisted game. It's a propaganda machine. And Jim Bob is still a jerk. So that's their big blowout over Christmas. And they weren't there to celebrate Christmas. They were there for a birthday party, which is still weird to have a birthday party on Christmas. But I guess if that's when your birthday is, what can you do? So next, Joy and Austin. So Joy and Austin, one of the things that we learned in Jill and Derick's book was that Jim Bob had cleared things on his taxes and put it on his kids' taxes as income. And then they got a tax bill. Now, I don't know if this has anything to do with anything, but recently, as of December 8th, 2023, the state of Arkansas Department of Finance and Administration has slapped a lien on their home for income tax debt that they didn't pay the state. And it's for $1,321.65. And it's for the tax years of 2019, 2021, and 2022. It says they are immediately requested upon circuit court judgment docket that the name of the above taxpayer and the amount shown is to be due at the date of entry. The entry should have the same force and effect of a judgment at law and shall constitute a lien upon real and personal property of the taxpayer paramount to all other liens from the date for the collection of the tax. And they are basically told that they need to pay it off. And if it's not paid off within 10 years, they don't have to take the lien off the house. So for some reason, and it's really strange too, because in the year of 2023, there's something going on with Joy and Austin's income, because they paid all of their property taxes late, and the property taxes for their home were finally paid, but they were late on their personal tax to the county of Washington County, and on their property taxes as well, and they were posted as delinquent. So they've paid those off in November, and then by December they have an income tax lien. And by no means is this a large debt. It's just kind of a weird, you just don't see this on the Duggars ever. Now it could have something to do with the property that they bought, that they were going to turn into an RV park, and then it didn't work, and so they were out the cash. But they ended up selling that property, and they turned right around and sold it, and they sold that property for $165,000. So it's definitely not that they don't have the money. Part of me wonders if the 2019 and 2021 could be income from the show that Jim Bob might be claiming for them that they didn't know about. Maybe even for 2022, could this be something that Jim Bob has done where they didn't even know that they had to claim this income, and now they're getting a tax bill for it? Something tells me it could be something along those lines, but I honestly can only speculate at this point. The only other Duggar that had something like this happen to them was Josh, and this was back in 2014 and 15, and he had a state and federal lien for non-payment of taxes. And I think the same thing happened with Josh, to be honest. I think Jim Bob reported income for Josh, and then Josh got slapped with a tax lien, and Jim Bob probably paid it off for him. So it's not a huge amount. It's more than likely they will pay this debt off, but kind of shocking that it would even get to a point where the lien is actually placed. You're typically notified well ahead of time that you have this bill due, and you need to get it paid, or else they're going to put a lien on your property. And you never want to have anybody putting a lien on your property. And this is a house that doesn't have a mortgage, and you certainly wouldn't want to have a house taken by the state because of unpaid taxes. And they were late on their tax bills for this year. Now, I get it. You can miss payments. You can even have mortgage payments be a couple days late because you're just so wrapped up. It happens to the best of us. So I hope whatever's going on with them is okay, but it feels like it has something to do with Jim Bob Duggar. And then we also know what's happening with Jeremiah and that property. So I'm starting to wonder, are we going to start to see this issue for a lot of the kids? Tell me what your thoughts are in the comments below. Bye, guys.